Welcome to the Leadership Lounge. It's great to have you with us again. I am really pleased that we've got Ashley Bowdler with us, Managing Director of Force Business Development, and Ashley and his team offer consultancy and support with strategic services. So great to have you with us today, Ashley.
Thanks, Colin. Yeah, great to be here.
Yeah, good. So our topic today is we're going to be looking at targeting talent and cultivating a continuous learning culture. And anyone who knows me knows I love a bit of alliteration. So as Ashley and I were discussing what we were going to look at, we're really going to be exploring how we target the talent and create that culture. Because creating a high-performing team is what every leader dreams of to accomplish their vision. And key to this is growing and nurturing talent and getting the best from everyone so that the team is greater than the sum of its parts. So today we're going to, in our podcast, explore how do you grow and manage the talent in individuals. When you bring that talent together, how do you ensure the dynamics bring the best out of the individuals, but also work well with a team? And then as part of that, we're going to explore how you cultivate that learning culture that enables people to grow. That's a real seedbed for growing staff and empowering the team. So Ashley, thank you for joining us and exploring all of these elements, but tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do so that our listeners can just get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm Managing Director of Force Business Development. We started that company about 18 months ago. We offer consultancy and strategic services for local businesses, and we've just started a little bit further afield overseas, which is great. And we predominantly work with businesses that are looking to grow and they're missing some skills, or they're looking to focus on a certain area, and that's generally the work we do with them.
So what brought you to this? What's your kind of roles that you've experienced before setting up Force?
So as a leader, I started quite early in comparison to others, perhaps through default. I was studying at college. I had an accident which put me out of action and forced me into making a choice very early on in my working life. And I made the choice to stay where I was in terms of employment, and I was a student in a food supermarket, not too many miles away from where I lived. And the kind of aim was to work my way up and try and see how far I could go there. And I started at 16, stacking shelves. And at 19 was picked to be the store manager for that supermarket and regionally as well. And that came from a lot of hard work, showing the right attributes, working with people to get the best out of them. And that's where I started as a leader, as a manager. And any given day I could be looking after 80 to 90 people and the department leaders within that supermarket as well. So 11 years later, I decided I wanted to go into an office environment and was fortunate enough to get a role within a large power company in Ipswich at the time, who have gone on to be sold off and have grown incredibly in that time as well. And at that time, I think that's where my leadership journey really kind of changed, and I was able to work more with a company that was growing as opposed to an established organisation. So my role in particular was quite key in introducing things like talent management and so on.
Yeah. So first of all, wow, getting that early leadership experience of leading a store, from age 19, and I guess those experiences you've had since, as you described, have enabled you to really look at developing talent in individuals. So just tell us a little bit more about your experience of developing talent in individuals then. Obviously you've told us some of that journey and some of the places you were at, but what's your experience of developing talent then?
The earliest memory I have where I look at talent and individuals and where they fit in with the team and how they can contribute is at 19 to 20 years old, and looking at other managers and seeing the response that others were given to either instructions or how they were treated, where they were put to work. And I stood back and I was observing their style, and it didn't fit right with me. So I knew that I had to work differently as a leader to get the best out of people. And that observational sort of skill set I built up very early has been quite poignant with the success of managed my teams throughout the last 20 odd years. And it was seeing the different leadership styles and how they either got the best out of people or found the worst. And on that journey, I've been fortunate enough to be put on numerous courses where you're taught about self-awareness and how your behaviour affects others. And that journey in the earliest days has been what set me up to just keep learning and developing more. And that's something I do on my own, in my own time as well. And obviously talking to people like yourself, where you're constantly learning more about the ways and the methods to get the best out of people. So that's my earliest memory of developing talent. It's that observational skills of how you as a leader need to adapt and change. And then going from that, putting them on to maybe a talent development plan and talking to them as an individual. And I can go into more of that perhaps in a moment. But the earliest days were the ones where I kind of learned more about myself as a leader and how I can affect others and manage talent and get them engaged in the journey.
So this identifying is really important. And you've just described that watching other managers and learning what does and doesn't work, but also watching individuals. So how do you identify this potential in people, almost the talents that perhaps being hidden slightly? What is it you're looking for? Because you talked about observing. How do you identify that talent and that potential?
It starts with knowing that the process to develop a person in a company, and each business will do very different things, but ultimately you want to get somebody on a development plan which should hopefully see them stay in the business long term. So the first port of call is to have individual performance reviews with everybody in your team, but taking that time really to get under the covers of that person and that individual, what motivates them, and seeing what characteristics they have. So identifying that talent is quite easy when you know what you're looking for, and not everybody wants to follow the same path. So as a leader, you have to be open to what they might want as an individual. It might not be what you want as the owner of a business or the leader. So asking the right questions, first of all, and getting them onto a kind of observational based program where you're maybe even gathering feedback from their peers and putting them onto a talent development plan. And it could look at a number of different areas such as productivity, it could be problem solving skills, potential leadership skills, creative skills, and identifying where they're strongest and where they're weakest, and then putting more time and effort into maybe upskilling them in the area that they want to work on or the area that they feel they want to go into. And each individual organisation will have very different characteristics they're looking for in different roles.
So it's just taking time, you said, almost to get underneath, isn't it? And just to really listen. You talked about what they're really passionate about as well, to understand that, and then just mapping out what you see for them in that kind of plan. So you talked about having a plan, but what else are the key components of growing that talent, allowing that hidden potential to come to fruition?
The main parts really of that process, allowing them to grow, is obviously recognising the area they should be working towards or what they want to work towards, providing the right environment for them to learn, providing them with coaching and mentoring, and allowing them to have a voice as well so that they can feel they're part of their own journey. If they're not sure on something, then they've got a platform to be able to voice that concern and engage with them. That is important. So regular reviews, regular appraisals, obviously they're incredibly important, but use that time to continually work on their talent and identify areas that they may want to work closely with you on as a leader or as a mentor. So it's all about the environment, the tools, and at the end of the day, recognition and reward to keep them engaged. So there are 2 or 3 key points to keep that talent growing. And I think those are the main areas to look at, and you can break that down and work it into your organisation however you see fit. And there's lots of tools that you can use to do that along the way as well.
I mean, the key element I'm hearing for our listeners is around that coaching them, and therefore giving them a sense of ownership in this journey as well. So you're doing it with them, alongside them, nurturing that, but the ownership sits with them. You help them to identify what it is they could be good at, to give them that, in one sense, I believe you could aspire to this when you've explored that with them. But then it's about coaching them to take ownership of it.
Yeah, 100%. And when they feel like they're owning it and they're driving it forward, that's when you get the best out of your talent. When they feel like they're the ones that are driving their career, their pathway, they're far more engaged than those that are not.
So I'm hearing there also then, it's spotting, have they got that willingness to want to grow? So it's almost this growth mindset within them. And is there a perseverance alongside that as well? So you can coach them, but there needs to be those two elements of a growth mindset and perseverance.
Yeah, and some people are quite happy to sit and plod and be in the role that they were first employed to do, which is absolutely fine. But you've got to keep them engaged. So it's important to still do this exercise with those that you might think, they don't want to get promoted, they won't want to move into that part of the business. So you can't use any bias in that at all. You have to give everybody the same opportunities, because they might change their mind. Circumstances outside of work might change. So every individual needs to be given the same opportunities, which comes into the equality equation of any business.
Yeah, great. So for me, Ashley, there are often different types of people that we kind of work with, and we need to nurture and encourage that growth. So I wonder if we could explore a couple of these types. So one of them, I think we often come across is the kind of more mousy person who is quiet and unassuming. And perhaps for many, they don't notice the mouse and they can't see the talent, but you can. You as the leader sees there's something in this person. So how do we go about growing their talent, but also their contribution to the team? The one that's quiet and mouse-like.
Yeah, I can remember a particular example, a young lady that I was working with, and she was part of a team that were, I think, 9 or 10 people in total, and I was the direct line manager. She joined out of an induction group and entered my team very full of enthusiasm for the role, but was always very quiet. After 6 months, she'd hit the ground running in terms of productivity, output, but engaging with the others in the team was almost non-existent. And I wanted to try and bring her out of her shell a little. So taking that time, as I mentioned, about looking at individuals' path, what they find engaging, where they want to go in their career, it became apparent that she was not wanting to work for the business forever. She took the role on to obviously pay her bills and so on, as we do. But her career goal was to be a one-to-one coach, as it were, in the NHS for people with dietary needs or a need of a nutritionist. And to get that role, she needed to have more confidence, obviously, and she knew that, but didn't know how to get the confidence to impress at an interview. Now, I wasn't naive to think that she would want to work with us forever, but while she was with us, I could see that quality that she had in her output, and that she would be a good role model for the others in terms of her working process, her organisational skills, and so on. So the one-to-one support I mentioned, I put her onto a coaching plan directly with myself, and coached her into becoming a mentor for the others within my team and further afield in the department as well. And she became my covering team leader when I was away from the business. So that was a baptism of fire for her, but I gave her the confidence that she would be able to deliver it with ongoing coaching and mentoring from myself, how to handle conversations, how to manage workload and so on. And after a short period of time, she started to impress, and that mouse-like person had become a voice within the company, respected by her peers. Other team managers were very observant at the time as well, and they could see that she was flourishing. But I knew in the back of my mind that this was all going to help her, not us as a business. But had I ignored that, I don't think we would have seen the best out of her as a business, and that impact would not have been felt by other people within the department that are still within the business that I know of. So knowing that giving someone the platform, the voice, the coaching, and the confidence to become more of a kind of voice, a champion within a business, the mouse has kind of grown from there. And it's that environment, it's the confidence building, providing a platform for her and some one-to-one coaching that was going to help her in her next career path. Without that, she wouldn't have been able to follow that, and would have probably become quite downbeat, maybe. It could be a little bit disruptive, perhaps, if someone's not motivated or they're feeling disenfranchised with something. They're not kind of on board with the greater part of the organisational goals, as it were. So that, as an example, I think is good to use in everyday business. It could be a business that's big, a business that's small, is to just be really observant on those mouse characters. There are hidden gems in there.
Yeah, there are, which is why I wanted us to explore, this type of character, because they can often be overlooked. But what I'm hearing from you and how we develop that talent is it starts by this sense of sitting alongside, listening, and discovering with them actually what's there. And that starts by building relationship so that they share stuff with you, so you can begin to understand actually what it is that, like you described with some of the others, fires them, floats their boat, what they're passionate about.
Yeah.
Then you talked about that coaching being key, providing that safety and security for her to try some new things and reflect with her and coach her through it, and giving her those opportunities that allow some of her interests to come to fruition. So if we're looking for some principles to help develop the mouse, it is about just that building relationship, listening, discovering about them, and then that coaching and opportunities to allow them to bring that hidden potential to flourishment.
Yeah, 100%, yeah.
Great. So another kind of character, probably quite apt at the moment as we're recording this, there's some European football going on. I've called this one the Ronaldo type. They know they're good, and they perhaps maybe even think they're better, maybe even than you as the boss. So there is this almost overconfidence in them. But how do you lead someone like that, A, to recognise their growth areas, because they might think they are amazing, and they will be amazing in many areas, but there are some gap areas for them that need to be worked on, sometimes character areas. So how do we help develop them, but also develop them in a way that also kind of helps the team? So what's the trick with the Ronaldo type characters?
The trick I find is keeping them humble and bringing their behaviour to their full attention. So educating them on how they affect others within the group, and that their position within the group is vital for the success of the organisation.
So just to peel out, there's some two key elements there, isn't it? Actually, what you bring is this. So for them to really understand, which they probably know anyway, but you're just emphasising this is what you bring, this is your strong qualities. But you've also talked about that challenge around the impact you're having is this. So this is your growth area.
Yeah. And going back, I've had a few Ronaldos. And they are good to have within your team, because you can use their skills to help others within that team, because they've got the confidence to do it. And it's educating them on, it's almost like holding a mirror up to them and saying, I've had a very frank conversation with somebody in the past to say, you won't get anywhere in life because your name is X and Y. You have to show other characteristics. Because you're good and you're happy to shout about it, doesn't necessarily mean opportunity will be dumped on your lap. You have to still show other characteristics, and bringing them back to that self-awareness, empathy, understanding there are the right times to gloat in front of people, that you're the best. So those conversations can be challenging because they may resist that kind of approach, but actually it's generally in the past for me worked quite well because of the relationships that I've managed to build up with those I've worked with, and having that conversation and then coaching them into, you need to go down this route and just listen and come away and work on how you then voice your opinion, because that shouting in, I'll do this, I'm good at this, doesn't wash with everybody, and you'll soon go down the pecking order of potentially being picked for a change in role or an enhanced promotion or something like that.
So alongside the giving them, this is what you're good at, so they are clear that the positives, this is your challenge. You've also then talked about that importance of helping them recognise what real success looks like. So they are driven by success. They want to be seen as successful. So you're helping widen their understanding that success isn't just about being the best. It is about what we've typically called soft skills, but I think are the most important skills around that empathy and understanding and emotional intelligence, to help them understand that they need to blend this with their current strengths. And that enables them to then continue to be even more successful.
Yeah.
But I like the way you've blended it into helping them see what success is, because they're driven by success.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so there's 2 characters we've looked at, and then some general work around how we develop people. I think one of the challenges that we can face as leaders is how we bring equity and avoid the trap of either being seen as having favourites that we develop, or to even fall into that trap. So how do we ensure there's equity? Because particularly if you're running, like you said, you might have had tens and tens and tens of staff, and can you give it to everybody? How do you get the equity then for development?
Within a large organisation, I think it's important to look at every team and every individual within a team, and you can score them in a way if you want to. There's lots of different methods, but actually talk about everybody. So everybody gets a platform behind the scenes that they are, represented, as it were, and it's up to the team manager, or the leader of that team, to look beyond maybe the peripheral and the other qualities and attributes they may be in possession of, and that's when those conversations can steer somebody that may be quiet, unassuming, not putting themselves forward for promotion. They could be found to be ideal for another part in the business. So if you're, as an organisation, doing that with everybody, and everybody is spoken about and all opportunities are on the table, you look at their all the different characteristics that you would want to see in a team and the business, and kind of put them together. So behind the scenes, it's a duty of care for every manager to do that. But individually, if you're in a small organisation and you've got maybe 4 or 5 people in your team, it is just ensuring that you're doing those regular reviews, you're doing that regular appraisal, you are asking the right questions, you're providing them a voice, a platform to use their voice when doing so. And that's a really important thing, because they'll feel that they are being given the equal opportunities they should deserve, and they do deserve. And that's when those conversations can go on another path, and that's when you find out things about people. And at that point, as a leader, you have to distance yourself and do the best for the individual, and not always for the organisation. Happiness is key to productivity, and positivity in the workplace is key. So making sure that you provide equality and equal opportunities for progression, talent management opportunities come up. So yeah, that's the way that I'd look at it, quite openly. Be very aware that you have to do that as a leader.
So what I'm hearing is, for large organisations, you obviously have other leads that help you to do that, the department heads. But what I'm picking up out of that, it's really important to have this culture that goes beyond just the appraisal piece of paper. I've come across far too many myself where appraisals, performance managements are very paper-based exercises. And what I'm picking up from you is the importance of having this culture, a culture of, we get to know each other, I get to look beyond the peripheral. You talked about what's coming out from this person, what could be something that will really drive and motivate them. And that we are creating in those that are leading these appraisals, this is the ethos, this is the culture that we have for our appraisal. It isn't about the paper, it isn't about ticking the boxes, it's about helping them explore by getting to know them.
Yeah.
It's all about them taking ownership of this development as well, as we were describing earlier.
And those conversations allow them to explore themselves, because they won't necessarily ask themselves the question. So, what do I want from my career? How do I want to progress?
Yeah.
You know, being able to ask themselves that question in an open forum, in a private environment, is quite important. So, I've seen people go from not really talking about, oh, I don't know what I want to do, you know, that kind of, to coming in saying, I like doing this, I'm really comfortable doing it, I get enjoyment out of it, and therefore, as a business owner, organisation, embrace that opportunity to use their skills and their motivation to either teach others, support training in a new intake of staff, or anything like that. And that gives them an opportunity to feel like they are using their skills and embracing their own, you know, positive impact on others.
It's interesting, as we're talking through this, I'm reminded of Daniel Coyle's book, Culture Code. And in that he talks about the best cultures. And one aspect was they talk about the boss that tells you it's straight, but also loves you to death. And so I think we're talking about this, aren't we, within when you're trying to discover that talent management, it is about helping them explore, but it is also something about calling things straight. I see this in you. Also, I see this bit that's not so good in you that needs to be worked on, but having that love you to death bit where actually I'm going to do all I can to foster and grow this.
Yeah.
So it picks up those elements for us. So let's move on then from the individuals. Now let's look at the team, because one of the challenges as a leader is that we can foster the individuals. We've got to get all these now talented individuals working well together. So let's look at these dynamics and how we grow it. So you have your team. They're a real mixed bag, a mixture of Mouse Ronaldo and your average kind of person as well. How do we get them to work well together?
You need to live and breathe the concept of teamwork, and that starts with the leader, the manager. One of the things that I'd had a lot of success in throughout my career is bringing people together, explaining how every individual contributes and how I see it, and perhaps how it could change, and get them as a group to buy into a new concept or a new way of working. But recognising individual qualities and piecing that together to get the greater result is how you need to look at it. And it could be you have somebody doing more in one area of the business and others supporting in another area, and collaboratively that team is excelling because you're using the right people in the right places.
So that picks out the good old one about get the right people on the bus and get them on the right seats in the bus.
Yeah.
When we're looking at Jim Collins' good to great stuff. And what I'm also hearing within this is that if we've got them contributing in the right areas, it's really important that they know this is what they're bringing, and they know without that contribution that then becomes a challenge.
And in that group setting as well, I've always found it really, really important to recognise contribution when I've seen it. You know, if someone's really gone above and beyond in their little, you know, in their area, is to highlight that in front of the group, and they take great pleasure about. It could be a round of applause. It could be, you know, giving them a gift voucher to say, well done, you've had a fantastic month. And the other, you know, the peers in that group are celebrating the success of the individual's efforts, but as a collaborative effort, you're reaching the end result. So I think that's the main element of reinforcing why teamwork is important and recognising people in front of a team. It's the same in sports in a way, where you get, in football, let's say you get a Players' Player Award. I was lucky to receive a few of those in my career, not at a very high level, but I felt that was the best part of the season, is the end of season awards as a team. If you were voted by your peers as the best or the most important part of that season, it's no different in business. And recognising contribution is vital in that team environment.
So there's a number of factors here, isn't it? If we're going to get these individuals working together, it's praising what you want to see, which I call the kind of meerkat moments. When you praise it, they all then turn. So there's a sense where you remind people of what the expectation is. There's an element here where you're seeing people model the teamwork you expect, that you're giving praise and reward to that. That again encourages kind of others to see it. Your analogy of the player's player, where there's a recognition from amongst your peers, and I guess I'm mindful that within a team, it's about each of them recognising this is what you bring, isn't it? And encouraging them to see that in each other, not just you as the leaders going, I see this in you, but for them to see what each role they play. So again, that reminds me of some work by Patrick Lencioni, where he talks about the truth of employee engagement. He says, you're known by the boss, you know what you do makes a difference, and then you know when you're successful. So when you've been talking about that, rewarding and saying well done, that's helping them realise, this is your contribution and this is where it's been successful, so they know they've been successful as part of that. So how do we stop, though, the big personalities taking over? I guess there's a link there to our Ronaldo types. How do we ensure that everyone's contribution is recognised and not the one big player takes the glory, the credit, the limelight?
That's always a challenging dynamic in a team, is the vocal person who wants the limelight, they want the attention. But I think prior to any group interactions, it's important to have those very frank and open discussions that actually this is the result and the impact of you doing so. You may make others feel inferior or not achieving. So you have to work very, very hard with those individuals to keep educating them and coaching into a better behaviour, as it were, in the environment that you want them to show. Yes, you've been good and so on, or you've got some good ideas. It's just bringing them back down to earth, and again bringing that kind of energy in at the right times, and telling them prior to any team interactions, you will have a voice, and it will be when I prompt you. Perhaps you have to have some strong leadership, but at the same time you need to embrace it, because it may encourage others to voice their opinion. So going around a room is always good.
Yeah, so that reminds me, just as you were saying that, I'm thinking, this is the hippo. So have you heard of the hippo?
I haven't, no.
No, so the hippo is the highest paid person's opinion. So what they say is that when you're particularly working with your team, that if you can, avoid the hippo. So exactly as you described, go around to the others first, so that they get their input. Otherwise, if you ask the hippo, it isn't necessarily the highest paid, but it's the person with the most influence in the room, or the biggest character in the room. If you go to them first, then everyone goes, well, there's no point, because the hippo's just told us, so we just do what the hippo says. So actually, as you said, to go around to others, but you've also talked about that frank conversation with them, say, I value your opinion, your input is great, we also need to give the others. So I'll ask you, let the others contribute too. So there is, as you said, that strong leadership where you're managing the room and leaving the hippo to last, but also you're having a word with the hippo to say, come on, let's the others make contribution too.
I'd always have that open conversation with anybody like that and say, I am going to come to you last, and this is why. And just tell them that the others need a voice. They need to have their opinion heard, because as a team, that's where we'll get the best ideas. If we give everybody an opportunity to come up with an idea, we'll be much better off for it. Yes, your ideas are great. I love that. I'll embrace that. But I'm going to ask you last, and I'll tell them, so that more often than not they get it, because they're quite energetic and high energy. They want to come in. But generally, I've never had any issues managing those type of people. They are always a challenge, because if it's not going well, then they're quite happy to voice that opinion again. So, yes, they keep you on your toes.
So we've just talked about people's opinions and stuff. So back in 2019, I wrote a blog entitled Value the Rebel, and it was linked to a particular kind of piece of work that I'd seen around this rebel and who are the rebels. And we tend to think the rebels, they're bad, but actually it's understanding where the drivers come from, the rebels. So in this article, it talks about different types of people that we work with. So you have the champion, who of course is high on motivation, high on energy. They're great to have in your team. You've got the walking wounded who are just a bit low on motivation and energy. You've got the foot soldiers, so they're quite motivated, but they perhaps don't have a great energy rate, but they just get on with it. Then you've got the well poisoners who are not so good on your team. They've got high energy for the destructive stuff. And then you've got the rebels. So they're high on motivation, but they're also high on challenge. So they often will question and challenge even what's going on. So I wonder whether it's worth looking at how we manage those different types of people to ensure we get the best from them, but also so that it works the best for the team as well. So the champion, good to have on your team. But how do we get the best from the champion? Because we could, of course, I guess, just leave the champion just to keep running like this forever clockwork machine that just keeps running and running. But is that the best way to kind of lead your champion for the team? What's the best way to work with champions to bring the best for the team?
Personally, I think if you leave a champion to it, eventually they will not be a champion anymore. They need that constant stimulation. They need that constant goal. Even if you change the goal, they need to be led towards it. And I think champions are the most powerful people in a business because they become your leaders more often than not. And you can coach and develop others to do the same and become a champion. But if you've got one in your team right now, my advice would be challenge them with support and then see what the result is. And then keep opening that up for more challenge. And that's when they'll build up their skill set. They'll be perfect to go into a role that may arise in the future. So it's constant stimulation, challenge, reward, recognise and evaluate again. So I'd constantly do that with them.
Brilliant. And there's a key word that came out as you're talking there was stimulation. So stimulate the champion, isn't it? As you said, give them this is where we're going, and give them that sense of challenge and what they're contributing. So that's great. Best way to work with a champion. What about the foot soldiers? They're all right. They're plodding along. They're doing the basics of what you need them to do. Can we turn the foot soldier into a champion? How do we bring the best out of the foot soldier?
These are my favourite people.
Okay.
Because you can turn a foot soldier, they're the most important part of your business, let's face it. Without all the foot soldiers you have, you've got no business. They're the most crucial part of any department. The run-of-the-mill, day-to-day grind, but you need to be right beside them to get your next champion. And if they're not ready for it right now because they're just happy plodding along, that's when you get into the people and into their mind, work with them and start getting them onto a plan of action where they can take on more responsibility and just keep elevating them in the group. And eventually when you see them become a champion, that's when you've done your best leadership. That's where the best coaching and mentoring has happened. So they're my favourite people.
Can I just chip in there? Because again, key word that I was picking out from that was elevate. So you talked about elevating them, which is, as I'm hearing that, it's about giving them that clarity again of where you're headed, but it's about giving them that coached opportunity to just shine a little bit. And what I'm picking up is, I'm not talking about giving them a massive elevate, that you're taking them from here up to there, but just those little steps of elevation, just letting them know what their next bit could be, their next contribution.
So it's almost like the carrot dangling in front of them, because they won't always know that's the part of the business they want to go into. If you recognise as a leader they've got certain qualities, start opening up opportunities to go into perhaps team meetings with other people as just a witness, an ear, and they'll get more ideas from that, and they'll feel part of a greater good. They then might go into another part of the business. So if you're doing the first part of our conversation well, you're breeding your next champion in the organisation.
So what I'm picking up there is an element of mentoring there, that's what's needed. So the champion, we give them a little encouragement, and here you're just talking about that mentoring, helping them see that next elevated step. And I love the way you said bring them into a meeting and get them to see what could happen, see what they could contribute. And I guess the key thing I always talk to people about mentoring is then that conversation that happens afterwards, isn't it? What did you notice? What do you think you could bring? And it's that aspirational conversation that comes as part of those. The other ones, in most organisations, we'll tend to have at least one walking wounded. What's the trick to help them heal their wounds and get engaged again?
First of all, you've just got to understand why they're walking wounded. Take the time to speak to them privately. It could be they've been overlooked for a role that they applied for. Could be something's happening outside of work that's putting tremendous pressure on their performance at work, and they become downbeat, and they're not performing as you would expect. But there's more in there. You've seen it. They've offered glimpses of it. So first part is conversation. How are things? First of all, let's be honest with each other in the room. I go back a few years. My wife was a walking wounded in her current organisation and is now flourishing because she just needed some time to talk about her grievances and why she hadn't been considered for promotion. And then it was just coaching them and educating them on the reasons why you may not have done. You might not have been showing the right characteristics, or voicing when you were asked to voice, or contributing when you were asked to contribute. So being aware of what may have held her back, and once we got to the bottom of that, I was able to help her go forward and then find that promotion she seeked.
So that sounds to me very much, again, it's that listening and giving them time to talk through their wounds.
Yeah.
But then you've also talked about this clarity again around, okay, so this is where you now find yourself, but you give them clarity around maybe aspects that may have contributed to that. And then help them to make those steps.
Yeah, and that support is crucial. Support and guidance, plans, further training if needed as well, and just being closer to them for a while, and bring them up to, a much more sort of well-balanced individual within the team.
And so our next one are the rebels, so which was the topic of the original blog. And the rebels can often be confused with well poisoners because they will talk about things they're not happy with or things that are wrong. But actually they're not. They're doing it from a different perspective. They're doing it because they care deeply about the organisation and they want it to be better. Whereas well poisoners often, just thrive on pulling things down.
Yeah.
So these rebels, who are perhaps being a bit challenging, they are criticising or saying things that aren't okay. How can we engage them? What's the key to getting them growing and involved?
First of all, understanding their frustrations, where they're coming from, and showing that you understand where they're coming from. That just de-escalates anything that's brewing, and then you can move on and try and resolve it. So the resolution process would be, okay, your ideas are X and Y. How about we present this to those that can maybe put that in place, or at least have a forum to discuss this issue. That works well in a large organisation. In a smaller company, perhaps, where you've got a small team and this is happening behind your back as a business owner, then it's from the word go, when you've got that open forum and the trust and so on with other people in the team, it's just having them come to you and say, so-and-so's griping about this, or the state of the warehouse or whatever it might be, and just knowing that you've got people there observing for you. So that culture of being accountable, everyone's accountable for the success of the business or the organisation, and hopefully somebody comes to you and says the rebel is rebelling. If you see it yourself, my first port of call would be to just agree that there is a grievance they need to air, and let's do it, and then you can tackle it step by step.
So the key steps for dealing with the rebel is, first of all, as you said, to listen, really understand it. And then you talked about taking, there might be some stuff in what they're raising that's real and relevant and could find a solution. So if they've got some solutions, it's about taking those forward. I think in my experience as well, where you can, actually in giving the role to the rebel to bring it to fruition. So, okay, if this is a problem, I'd like you to take a lead on it. I can think of a number of people who might have been seen as rebels because they were challenging. And when I then said, okay, fair point, can you help me solve it then? Actually got someone with massive energy for getting that sorted, because they're quite passionate about it. And often the rebels will have found feet in both camps, in terms of if you've got some people that are disenchanted, they're actually the best people to then bring those others along as well. Yeah,
definitely. I've just remembered a particular occasion where a rebel would be quite critical of the team management as a whole. Not myself, although it was the organisation I was working in at the time. And my response to that, because he was quite a vocal rebel, is to say, right, okay, next week you're in charge. Because you're able to do a better job. Okay, off you go. I'll be here, but let's see how you deal with it without any coaching, training, leadership skills. And he soon changed his tune. But he still wanted to go down that path. I said, okay, now you've had a little taste of it. You now know what you need to work on. And you understand the constraints you're working with. You understand the problems that may be there and that can't be changed. So you've got to work with it. It wouldn't be an exercise I would encourage, but as I was there sitting opposite, it was quite easy to kind of see how that was panning out and step in when you needed to.
Even with that slightly bold tactic, what we're talking about there is engaging them, isn't it? A key thing with the rebel is engaging them in the process, then engage them in the realities, help where hopefully they'll help to drive that improvement. But if nothing else, it helps them give a realisation of the challenges that you might be facing. And the last one of that little group then was the well poisoners. You know, they're the most destructive. How do we work with those?
This is where leadership is very, very different to that coaching and training, supporting. You have to look at it quite objectively. Are they going to be able to work within this organisation? And be very, very clear on that. If they are, and you go through the methods of, you know, performance improvement and so on, however that might look in your organisation. But ultimately, you can get to a point where you try and work with them and the answer is no, they're not right for the business. And that's when you have to be very, very direct and address that situation quickly. You can't ignore it. They cannot be ignored. They have to be addressed quickly. So if you've got a well poisoner, you've got to jump on them as quickly as possible because they will start, like a domino effect, that whole organisation will begin to collapse.
So the key thing here is clarity of expectation. This is what we expect here. And we need you to fit into it. And if they're not going to fit into it, then you have to take those tough decisions with them. Because you are talking about a culture of your organisation and the success of your organisation. And as you say, it needs some fairly swift dealing with. Sometimes people find themselves become well poisoners because a little bit of thinking becomes more thinking, and it's become an unhelpful habit. And there is a potential and a willingness to change. So we need to give them that opportunity, don't we? But if they're not going to change, then you have to have those tough conversations with them.
One of the main things I always look at is, is it morale based? Is it motivational? Is it skill based? Is it, opportunities haven't been there? So just start working through what that problem might be, how it started. Certainly if it materialised almost overnight, what happened? It could be resolved, but ultimately, yes, you might end up on that pathway to parting ways with somebody that you cannot lead into the right ways of working.
Yeah, there has to be a willingness, doesn't there, for them to engage. So that brings us nicely into the culture that we want to create and creating this continuous learning culture, this growth mindset, both as individuals but also as a whole group. And what we want is to have everybody constantly wanting to review and improve. So what are the key components for us to enable this kind of learning culture within our team?
I think it starts at the top of any organisation, if I'm honest, and first of all, the managers and the leaders themselves being on that path, always learning, always developing their own skills, and, the team will see that as that is the culture. Oh, my team leader or my manager, the boss, is on a course today.
Yeah.
So they're seeing that, and then you can replicate that within your team. So it's making sure that opportunities are available, looking for opportunities outside of the environment that they normally work in to develop their skills, soft skills, technical skills, and just constantly having those conversations that I think you would be good on this course, or I think this might help you. Would you like to go on it? So those conversations where those opportunities are presented and they see that from the top down, that is part of the culture.
So as we model that as leaders, as we model and hold the conversations, so there's regular conversation around learning and improvement, that then creates the environment for that to want to grow. I'm wondering as well, I think this very much links to the whole black box thinking that Matthew Said talks about, what's working well, what could be even better. We look at that for us as individuals, we look for us as a team. And so just thinking about what you were saying there about us as leaders modelling that, I think when we as leaders model or what's working well, what could I do even better? When we start modeling that conversation with others, then that starts a vulnerability loop that means others feel equally able to own up or to own their kind of things that are working well, but also the things they want to grow and develop in. So I just think that you're right. I think starting that ourselves and creating that culture, creating the vulnerability that I'm not perfect. I want to learn. I want to grow. There's things I don't do right. Can really create that with our
definitely
people. So it starts from the top. Is there anything else you think is really key to enable this kind of learning and growth culture?
Regular reviews of that process and the steps that you've put in place are important because things change. So being adaptable, being flexible, and introducing a feedback loop as well. I think they're important because behind the scenes the people may not be feeling that they're benefiting them, and a feedback loop that's behind the scenes, maybe anonymous, just encourages them to have a voice and continually have a part in their journey. So it's a case of not just saying this is what we do, we offer this. It's also giving them a platform and a voice to almost own the process that the company has in place as well.
Yeah, and just hearing you talk about that, I think there's a real importance for creating safety, where people feel they can talk openly and honestly and have that review. Because if you don't feel safe, you're not going to talk about the bits that perhaps feel a little bit unsafe, isn't it? And so creating a space where it's okay to give and receive that kind of feedback is going to be crucial. The last question before we kind of then move on to talk about our top 3 tips, because time flies when we're having fun in the Leadership Lounge. The last question is just around how we avoid this kind of learning culture becoming all-consuming and almost going into the red on the rev counter of us never feeling good enough. So this growth mindset, this growth attitude is really important and will help us to become better and better. But if we overplay it, we're just in this sense of, I'll never be good enough. I've always got to improve. And we become striving, we never find what we're looking for, to almost quote you too in that. So how do we avoid it becoming too consuming and us never being good enough?
It's got to be quite organic and not forced, first of all, because if it's forced upon people or the organisation are forcing certain demands, targets and so on, it can become a little bit daunting as opposed to engaging. So I think it has to be very organic in as much as from the induction of somebody coming into a team or their first day, you will be developed, you will be put on a talent plan, and that is yours. So you own it. If you want it to stop because you've plateaued, you don't want to go any further, that's fine. We'll embrace that, but we'll continue to review it because things might change. And I think going back to the people, as they're the most important part of your business, it's to not force an organisational objective onto them. It's to engage them in themselves and their journey. And if you're inside their journey, if you like, then it will be organic and it will go where it needs to go. And ultimately the business will succeed as a result. I think if you're putting hard and fast targets and measurements in place, it doesn't have the same impact. It becomes too almost clinical, if you like. It's very black and white, and you can't move off it.
So what I'm hearing there is a sense of us being really authentic in our conversations, as you say, not forcing company-driven stuff. This is actually starting from the individual and how they can contribute. And takes us back a little bit full circle on some of that Learn-See-Only work. Know what your contribution is and how it makes a difference and how it's fitting the purpose. But it's driven from what am I bringing to this? Yeah. Great. So we always end our Leadership Lounge, Ashley, with kind of top 3 tips. So if you were going to be sharing these with our listeners, what are your top 3 tips for kind of developing and targeting talent and kind of creating this continuous learning culture?
First of all, before you have any conversations, look at your own leadership style. So self-awareness, first of all. Look into self-awareness. What does that bring? How does that play out in front of a team? So that would be my top tip. Work on your self-awareness as a leader, what the impact is on others, how you might be seen by others. Because if you're aware of it and you work on it, those conversations and the authenticity of those conversations mean much, much more. Yeah. That's the first tip.
Yeah. What's your second?
Emotional intelligence, I think, because you can uncover a lot of things having conversations with your team, and being emotionally intelligent allows you to react in the right way. You'll judge people without being biased, and you'll give everybody an equal opportunity. So emotional intelligence is something that I've worked a lot on since being 19 years old. At a 19-year-old lad, you're quite headstrong. You might have that confidence or that air of confidence, but the emotional intelligence to handle a conversation and steer it in the right part, in the right way, is important. So that's tip number 2.
And tip number 3?
Tip number 3 would be something quite different. You might not have heard. Well, open-eyed leadership. So leadership with open eyes. So go into your environment, review how you've walked in yesterday, and go in tomorrow in a different way with your eyes wide open. So observe people, observe how they interact with others, what's missing, what can you change, and that has to be done every single day. And that open-eyed leadership from the start of my conversation with you today is what's steered me on my leadership journey. Seeing how others behaved in interactions with other managers, and how you might be able to change it.
And that, although you've called it open-eyed, it links to what you were also talking earlier about listening, isn't it? Is that, what am I looking at, what am I hearing, and just spending those time with people to pull that out. Yeah, quite key, I think, that one to develop talent. Ashley, thank you for joining us in the Leadership Lounge this month. It's been great having you. To our guests who are either watching or listening to us, we thank you for joining us in the Leadership Lounge, and we look forward to you joining us in our next one.